Okay. Well, it's quiet in here. Do I interpret that as a sense of expectation? Hopefully. Okay, before we move any further, thank you for being patient. We're a little past our start time, but we'll make that time up. Before we go any further, we need to be upstanding for the national anthem, if you can, please. Thank you very much.
Oh, Montserrat, dear motherland, your children raise your standard high in toil and tears to serve you well, a crowning jewel from God's hand. Oh, Montserrat, by nature blessed, to you your children sing. Come, well of all, come, friend of all, to you your people cling.
Please remain standing for a prayer.
Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, we want to thank you for bringing us all together in this room this morning. Lord, we praise, we adore you, and we glorify you. Lord, we know that you have already inspired us with words, ideas, thoughts, and we know that you have brought us here for a reason. We ask in, O Lord, that you shower us with your blessings. We ask that you allow us to bring all those thoughts and ideas to play so that we may have a very successful day. We ask your blessings in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, please sit down. Please take a seat. Okay, well, welcome. Let me welcome the dignitaries today. Can I welcome the Parliamentary Secretary, Veronica Hector Dorset, alongside the Permanent Secretary, Camille Thomas Gerald, Director of Social Services, Teresina Fergus, and Director of Education, Dr. Gregory Julius. So, welcome, one and all. Welcome those online, etc., to this workshop. I stress the word work, so we will be working round tables, and that facilitates discussions. And so at the end of the day, we hope to have some recommendations and ideas from you to feed into the national policy on disability, which is why we're here. First of all, some housekeeping. There's no fire alarm scheduled for today, so if you hear something go off the alarm, it's a real one, so you make an orderly transition outside. I guess by now you're familiar with where the bathroom is here. It's on the ground floor, both male and female. It's an all-day session, so there's refreshments outside. Please feel free to get up and access them at your will. You will be fed lunch about 12 o'clock. I'm going to go through the agenda in a minute. We've structured today where we're focusing on children in the morning and adults in the afternoon. That's not to imply any seniority on one or the other. They're both important when we come to discuss disability on the island. That's just the way we've structured it. Please turn your phones off or put them on silent. Okay, and my name is Sinclair Coward. So I work at Social Services, and I'll be your host for today. Without further ado, let's have some opening remarks. Can I call on Permanent Secretary Camille Thomas Gerald again? Oh, please welcome her to the podium. Please welcome her to the podium.
Good morning again. The protocol has already been established, so I will proceed. It is said that an open door is a welcome that makes a stranger into a friend. But this morning, I see that there are no strangers in the room. We are all friends. we have come from various backgrounds to converge here. I look around the room and I can see that you are already beaming with your ideas, your thoughts, and your knowledge. And you are here to contribute to our first national policy within the Ministry of Health and Social Services, and also for, ultimately, the government of Montserrat. I am not going to be long this morning because I leave those words for Mrs. Dorset Hector. So really, on behalf of the Ministry of Health and Social Services, I welcome you to our national policy on disability. Thank you.
A very pleasant morning to all. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this consultation on the national policy for persons who are differently abled. Formally, we use the term persons with disability. Should I intermingle, please forgive me. I acknowledge the preceding protocol, but I want to give respect and honor to our Right Honorable Dr. Clarice V. Barnes. I also see that we have in our midst a Dr. Mona from Antigua and any other visiting specialists. I wish to acknowledge your presence among us. I wish to thank all of you for being here and those who are joining us online. These are the days. This consultation aims at canvassing insights and recommendations on advancing the government of Montserrat's national policy on persons who are differently abled, a policy that is very much needed here in Montserrat. And I believe you're showing your commitment today by just being here. I am absolutely delighted with the inclusive complexion of today's consultation. It is important that we canvass the views of all. May I tell you that with your involvement, I know that you're going to make a difference to the services both to children and adults and to others. Persons, I am confident, who are well able to address the issues affecting both our children and adults. Today's consultation, my brothers and sisters, affords us the opportunity of coming together and truly sharing our views and our ideas. I know, and I encourage you, please engage and ensure that what we do today creates a wave that positively impact our people, our country, our land, and further afield. Because Montserrat is known to be first among the region and elsewhere. In our deliberations, our discussions, our disagreements, yes, we will agree. It's not always that we see the vision through the door, but when we look through the window, quite often, there's another perspective. So we welcome the different perspectives, but when we do disagree, we must do so respectfully. The United Nations Convention, which was passed in 2006 and ratified by the United Kingdom in 2009, has not been extended to Montserrat. But be that as it may, we are here today because we all care and we want to make a difference to the lives of the people, the country, for differently abled persons and persons who work with them and care for them. Today's consultation and those that will follow are critical in realizing one of our national vision pillars. And therefore, I charge us in seeking to realize this vision pillar of a healthy, wholesome, and let me add prosperous Montserrat. where our people can realize their dreams and hopes in a democratic and God-fearing country. This vision's pillar, my brothers and sisters, applies to those who are differently abled, their parents, families, and they're entitled, like everyone else, to hope and to participate fully like everyone else. I was given a calendar and I've walked with it. Matches my address, 2021. UNICEF. It's a calendar for the Eastern Caribbean region. It impacted me greatly, for it says, reimagine the future. I want you to stop for a second and think of our land. Reimagine the future. A better Montserrat. Where we arrived here this morning, we have some ideas, but I want us to push further. Push further as we're challenged in this calendar with the children. It's mainly the children who are speaking. And as you see, they have a voice. We must reimagine a world where every child is included. We must reimagine a world, a Montserrat fit for every child and every adult. We must reimagine a world free from discrimination. We must see discrimination in its widest sense. Its hiding places, root it out, annihilate it, and let this policy be the vehicle, the tool that we can use to reimagine a better future, a brighter future for our Montserrat. I plead with thee, I implore thee, do not use the words in this consultation today, there is no money. I don't want to hear it. And anyone who speaks it, please let me know, because we're going to start a fund and they'll put the money in that bottle. What I've learned, my brothers and sisters, and I believe yourselves, money is important for the things we need to do. And people find money to do the things that are important to them. And governments find money to do the things that are important to them. Therefore, if our persons who are differently able are important to us, we must find that money. Do you agree? Certainly, if we want an equitable and just society in which all of our people can fulfill their hopes and their dreams, we must be the voice for the voiceless through this policy, the advocates that never let up. We need to ensure that no one is left behind, and this policy must be a bold step in that direction. We know that data is not one of our strong points, and so we are unable to give you accurate statistics today, but you will put that in the policy. We know also that non-communicable diseases are on the rise across the world, and it is intended, from what we hear, to rise or increase by 56%. But I can tell you, we can reimagine a different result right here in Montserrat, and our primary health sector is working assiduously to do this. A serious concern of our children is that they require individual plans to support their learning journey, which is impacted through forms of impairment, restrictions, and resources. Some of them are currently in their early years and the phase and may not be getting the support they need to transition successfully to complete their compulsory schooling. This is an issue, my brothers and sisters, that affects us all and should concern us all. We have recently met in the Education Department to address this issue, among others, and remain committed to positive intervention. We must know, after all, a child that is in any way differently able will one day become an adult that is also differently able, and perhaps with even further and enhanced challenges if we do not do something. May I remind you, Jesus said of the blind man, his parents did not commit any sin, nor did he. It was for God's glory. And so too, we must ensure that our persons who are differently abled can shine for God's glory. And remember, accidents occur, our bodies change, life is dynamic. Today for me, tomorrow for you. Today for me, and tomorrow for you. I am committed, and I challenge us today not to be another talk shop. Let us all work together to ensure that these recommendations which emerge are implemented. Whether or not the United Nations Convention on the Rights have been extended to us, like I say, we will go forward together. Doing the right thing is the right thing to do. This is an international human right intended to protect the rights and dignity of persons. They are not to be treated as objects of charity, medical treatment, social protection recipients, or as media opportunities, but as full and equal members of our society with their human rights. A nation is known by the way it treats its persons who are vulnerable. Today's consultation on the national policy for persons who are differently able speaks volume. All of your voices, your contributions are invaluable. From vision to reality, says the 2024-25 budget. Our recommendation must take into account the need for a legal framework, human, infrastructural, financial resources to support our people. Children and adults who may experience increased difficulties and challenges. We must, in our deliberations, consider the many parents, families, guardians, teachers, social workers, among others, who are required to work with persons who are differently abled, who rely on us to advocate for them. Vital in all of this, we demonstrate what I call care, with an E times 2. We collaborate, we advocate, we respect, we empathize, with equity being at the forefront, because that equals justice. I don't want to be much longer, but I must. For some unknown reason, and I have to be careful how I pronounce the name, Mephibosheth and King David. Out of the blue, I was not at all contemplating Samuel. I was not in that book. But it took over my mind. And some of you may know of Mephibosheth. He was Jonathan's son. And while they were there was an attack. And his nurse dropped him, and he became crippled. David ascended to the throne, and David asked, who of Saul's house can I do good to? We would remember that Saul chased David for almost 40 years to kill him. But David ensured, when he learned of Mephibosheth, that he was cleaned up and ate at his table, because he, as far as David was concerned, descended from kings and should be treated like royalty. as we would have done, and as we do, he got Ziba, the guardian, to take care of him and his estate. But life happens, and David's very son, Absalom, chased him out. But he had to pay for his sins as well. He was left in the care of Ziba. Ziba met David with a donkey with lovely things. Oh, I have come. There's no, let me get it right, I'm not ashamed to say, Mephibosheth. When David came back, David wanted to know what was wrong. Found Mephibosheth in a poorly state, hair uncombed, dirty. And he said, "O king," I imagine, "O king, I sought to come to you, but Ziba took the donkey and left me behind." Ziba, whom the king had appointed to take care of Mephibosheth, had taken over his property. And I must say that David is much kinder than I am, because David eventually got him cleaned up and gave Ziba some of his estate. But for me, it tells me that we must be very careful. We must be very careful when we put our people in persons' hands. We must ensure that our policies establish checks and balances. And we must ensure that justice and equity is done. I again recite these words, which I call care, collaborate, advocate, respect, empathize, and whatever you do, exercise equity so that justice is done. On behalf of the government and people of Montserrat, I thank you so very much for giving of your time, your expertise, your experience. These cannot be underestimated. I look forward to a fruitful consultation. I am confident that together we can make a difference. One for all and all for one. We are many peoples in here this morning. One nation, one for all and all for one. God bless each of you. God bless us all. God bless Montserrat. And may this consultation result in giving God glory. For those of you who are not so inclined, with the same religion, I respect that, but do allow us to give credence and honor and glory to the God who have brought us through the rough times, the tough times, and who have been with our persons with, it's what I wanted to say, with disability, for persons who are differently able to this day, and has equipped you who are here and online to take this word forward. I thank you so very much for your attention. And again, God bless us all.
Thank you, Honourable Dorset Hector. As I call Dr. Paz up, our first presenter, Dr. Sylvia Paz, while she's coming, let me go through the agenda for you. We have 3 speakers this morning. From the children's perspective, we have Dr. Paz, who's a pediatrician here in Montserrat. We have Dr. Julius, the Director of Education, and we have Ms. Mona Gardner, Speech and Language Specialist from Antigua. Okay, let me give way quickly to Dr. Paz. Dr. Paz, you'll probably introduce yourself while you're here. Thank you. Can we give a warm welcome to Dr. Paz? Thank you.
Thank you very much. While they load the presentation there, I'm just going to load mine over here to make it easier. go forward. So then you see this one. Okay, we can. All right. Okay. Good. So thank you very much. And it's a big responsibility to be the first speaker today. I'm Dr. Paz, and the pediatrician for the Ministry of Health and Social Services of Montserrat. And I've been practicing here for just over 2 years, and it have called my attention the different numbers of children that I have found during my practice with special needs. So today we're going to talk a little bit of what I found and some gaps that we have, and we wait for your recommendations later on during the workshop. So, okay, children with disabilities. The first thing we're going to see in this slide is that you will see that it's easy to find a child with disability. You can see in this picture, somebody's in a wheelchair, somebody have no arms, somebody have no legs, somebody seems a little bit blind on the eyes, the other one is using sign language. This is what we call a visible disability. The cute one in the middle is a child with a Down syndrome. He got different features, and everybody says, look, this child has something. So that's the visible disabilities. But nevertheless, there are all different types of disabilities, and especially those so you cannot see. So the physical disabilities are easy to see. Sensory disability like blind, deaf, and things are easy to spot. There will be intellectual disabilities as well, children who do not learn well. And many times you cannot spot them unless they have different features, like in the case of the Down syndrome. Communication disorders, children with language delay, with stuttering, children who have other challenges with languages also have a disability. Communication disorders, that's what behavior and emotional disorders, conditions affecting emotions and behavior of the children. And some examples with the children with attention deficit disorders and autism spectrum disorder. So these are not easy to spot, and those children often are labeled like they are naughty, they don't behave, like that. And they are children who have their own challenges. Also, other learning disabilities for those teachers who are more involved with this area will be dyslexia, dyscalculia, and there are many of these different ones, like different categories on that. So those children are also have disabilities, or I like the word I said before, differently able. So this is a slide showing what I found. Recent descriptive studies in Montserrat, based in my number of consultation and developmental assessment of children, preschool children under 5 years, have revealed these very worrying numbers. So we have a total of 41 children that was taken from February 22 to November 24, that's 23. So in just less than 2 years, we found 41 children who need some type of help. And 1 in 4 preschoolers that will be in the classroom of 20, at least 5 of them will have something, a little bit of delayed language, different varieties, but something that they need extra help. And one is 6 preschoolers, they will present with atypical development and behavior issues as well. So this means that we will potentially have a significant number of children with special needs. And that can vary in different categories, whether it's mild, it's moderate, or some of them have quite serious disabilities or impairments or challenges that we need to address. So I'm going to make you think a little bit, and then we have 2 children and 2 different paths. These two children were born somewhere in the Caribbean, in a rural area, and they are very happy children, busy in their own ways. They have very bright smiles, and they have a very different way of thinking. The way that they see the world is a little bit different. So these two children are going to take two different paths. One will stay in his rural area, somewhere in the Caribbean. The other one, the parents migrated to somewhere north, to the city, when there are more accessible resources. So what happens, the first child is called Alex. Alex stayed in somewhere in the Caribbean, and Alex was not understood. He had to face his own challenges by himself. And this is Alex. In a corner, parents said, you are naughty. Let me give you another hiding and to see if you learn it right. Teacher says, my child is not learning, this child is not learning, he shouldn't be in this school, he's not progressing. Parent says, I don't understand. The child says, I can't make friends. The other children just bullying him around because he's different, he does different things, he doesn't catch the things, he got different abilities. So this happened to Alex. While we have Noah went somewhere else, and he was thriving with the support that he needed from peers, from parents. The parents joined a support group. The peers, the friends were taught how to deal with different children. The teachers were helping, and there were comprehension all over the growing up of Noah. And Noah ended being independent and getting a job when he was older. So this raises the disparities that we have, and I call it geographical fatality sometimes. And unfortunately, this is facts. These numbers are put in there. 90% of children with disability, they come from low-income countries and receive no interventions at all. It's the same 90% on the bottom with children that don't complete school or don't ever have access to school. And rural and remote communities are less likely to get access to resources and schools and all the help that they might need. So also to say that it's estimated by the World Health Organization that there is 240 million people with disability and 50 million are children. So there is something that we really need to address and take into account, that many countries, there is no justice. Many children, depends where they are, receive help or not. So the power of early identification. Why I'm so obsessed to preschool children? I am, yeah. Because the brain grows in the first 5 years of life. Remember, from the time you were conceived, you were nothing, there was one cell. The body grows, so the brain does. At the age of 5 years, you have a size, nearly the size of the brain of your adult brain, which is about 80% of the size of the head, like that, because the brain grows and the brain gets information. The brain gets, it's like a sponge catching everything, teaching a child to learn. Not only learning, teaching to learn even in the future. So we need to prepare those children before they even enroll to school to be able to learn in their own ways, in their own capacities. So I pointed there are more opportunities, there's more chances to make them adapt to the environment and to make the others adapt to children with special needs. Also, improving independence, improving the quality of life, meaningful social engagement, and allowed also different stakeholders, many of us sitting on these tables today, to create provisions for children with special needs. So, what happens when I pointed or I refer, I say, or not only me, there's teachers, there's sharp nurses, there's people in the community approaching us said, I think this child, we know, there's something that I don't find quite okay, let's have a look. So when we spot this, what are we gonna do? What is next? Now I can make a diagnosis, let's say, of attention deficit disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and what is gonna happen next? So this is the challenges that I have found and I faced in Montserrat, and many of us have been facing. Failure and continuation of care of the children, very poor early services, audiologists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, play therapists, specialized educators, sensory rooms for the school. I just love the idea to have sensory rooms in the clinics and at the school so children can develop and they can develop their motor skills and they can keep busy in their own ways by their learning. And then support groups for parents and caregivers that face similar challenges. So, not everything is going wrong. There are few things going right, and we're going to praise it and embrace it. So we had a pediatrician, yay, and I'm permanently here for 2 years. I'm hoping to be a little bit longer as well. And we had a specialized pediatric psychologist, Dr. Imara. We have an educational psychologist, Dr. Gomez, or Ms. Gomez. And we have a lovely team of nurses, educators, and many people able to target children who need special needs. We're also hosting an annual visit with a therapist. Thank you to the Ministry of Health and Social Services. We are going to be hosting for the 3rd time a group chats. They're going to be talking to us later on. And they are specialists from Antigua, speech and occupational therapists come to evaluate the children and do some therapy sessions. We are also have procured, and I'm just crossing my fingers, I think it's happening. We're soon going to get our hearing test device, so we'll be able to do some hearing tests, not only for the children, but we'll start with the children as a priority, but then we will enroll the rest of the population who needs hearing testing as well. We also have received support from University of West Indies, and a great team from Barbados came to assess children with educational needs, and Dr. Julius will probably talk about that later, and just anticipating that we have had that help from the Department of Education. And we also having a disability workshop today, so this is a great advance. So we are moving forward. Yes. Okay, so their recommendations, and this is from me and my little team, very humble. We need greater efforts by Department of Education and Department of Health and Social Service to provide early intervention to children in need. And I keep talking about early intervention. I'm not saying not interventions later, but early are clue. Training our own staff, we could do more training. We can bring trainees to Ireland and train more staff to deal with these children and the parents and support them. We need something that I'm not allowed to say in this workshop, but in another word is budget. I didn't say the M word. Consider possible, also not the M word, but it's financial support as care dependency grant, disability grants, and all those things are needed to support families. Those policies have been carried on in many other countries, why not in Montserrat? And then we need to be ready and prepared to provide special curriculum to children with special needs. We cannot learn the same. My math is not good enough to go to 3rd level math. So we all have to learn in our own curriculum, like it was mentioned before. So these few quotes that I would like to read with you. Every child deserves the chance to reach their full potential regardless of ability. Support service can make that possibility a reality. Investing in early interventions and support services isn't just helping children with disability. It's an investment in a brighter and more inclusive future for all. The true measure of society greatness is how it treats the most vulnerable members. Comprehensive support services ensure that no child is left behind. On my last slide is another 2 quotes that this is my final message, and I really hope with this workshop we'll go to make sure that this is happening in Montserrat. Disability is not an inability. It's an opportunity for innovation and resilience. Let's create a world where every child can thrive regardless of ability. Supporting children with disabilities is not a charity. It's an investment in a more equitable and compassionate world. Let's invest wisely and reap the dividends of inclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Paz. That's an uplifting and optimistic and spiriting contribution to our workshop today. While Dr. Gregory Julius makes his way to the podium, please, can I say that you may have noticed that this is a professionals workshop. We haven't cut out the people who matter, the people about whom we're discussing, the people with disabilities, the parents of children with disabilities. There'll be a separate workshop just for them, unencumbered by the presence of people whose responsibility it is to give them services so that they could speak freely. So there'll be a separate workshop arranged for parents of children with disabilities and adults with disabilities. Dr. Gregory Julius, can I call you up, please? Thank you very much. And as we've done in the past for every speaker, can you give a warm welcome to Dr. Gregory Julius?
Good morning, everyone. I'll adopt the protocol that has been established. I must say, Mrs. Dorset Hector, you have placed me under tremendous pressure. But Dr. Paz, I think that you probably are the first person who is going to put the money in the pot because you mentioned the word finance. You mentioned the word money or finance because I was going through my script and I was hoping that the word finance or money wasn't placed in there at all, and I think I scraped you. But nonetheless, if it is there, then I'll be the second person to put money in that pot because we're not supposed to mention the word finance or money. Nonetheless. Right, so just quickly, quick presentation from the education perspective, but all in conjunction with disability. I just want you to help me there together. Let's just read the vision together, please. Everybody? The mission? And just across there, we know that famous gentleman, very notorious quote. Let's read it together. Okay, and I leave those words with you to provoke your thoughts. Think of what you have in mind, but more so in the context of what we want to achieve today. Right, for those of you who are new to Montserrat and those of you who might not be totally familiar, just a quick preview to what the Ministry of Education and departments look like. We have the strategic and management area, a number of things there. The Department of Education in particular, but at the bottom we have an area for student support services. We have library, information services, and we also have community youth sports services. And then a number of units collectively come together to do the business of education in a whole. So that's the benefit for those of you who don't quite know. Right, So what the big question really is, what's the rationale for developing a contract? Get it sharp on? Okay? Okay. Anyway, I'll do my best. Right, so what's the rationale for developing a national policy on disability? School context, what as I said, in conjunction in relation to the other areas. Well, one, it has to do with equal access to education, and that is critical. It ensures that children with disabilities have the same opportunities to access quality education as their peers. This has caused me to really reflect back to when I was a boy growing up. And I'm sure some of you can also identify with it. And back then, you had situations where some persons, you recognize that they weren't going to school, and especially those who were associated with Down syndrome. And more or less, they were kept home. And you fast forward that in today's context and realize in today's context that will be considered as an issue, because we are saying here today that all children, irrespective of their conditions, should have access to education. And again, I leave you to reflect on your own context and personal experiences. Inclusive also, such a policy, it promotes inclusive education, which benefits all children, both with and without disabilities, by improving learning outcomes and fostering understanding and social integration, which you'll be dealing with a lot in your discussions in your groups. Economic and social contribution. A national policy of this magnitude helps prepare children with disabilities to contribute economically and socially to their community. Again, we can look at it in terms of the big picture. If we ensure that all of our students, our children, and of course the adult will come later on, are given this opportunity, it will in the end contribute to economic and social development. In that, the government of the day will do not need to spend that extra money to support those individuals because they are self-reliant. They're supporting themselves to developing their own skills, their own career, and make their contribution. Hence, on the other side of the scale, the government can now allocate or reallocate that money you would have to spend on those children to something else. Hence, it is important because economic and social contribution within any given country is important for standards of living. Reduction of stigma. It addresses stigma and discrimination, thus creating a more accepting and diverse society. We recognize how diverse our society has become, with different groups of people, different abilities, and the like. And so it is important. Back in the day, when I was growing up, in actual truth and fact, there was a lot of stigma placed, and we have to be real and honest. A lot of stigma was placed on a lot of these students who were unable or who seemed different from the norm. And hence, we recognize that we need to move away from that stigma or stereotyping type of behavior. Of course, any policy must have reference to legal compliance. It aligns with international treaties and conventions, and you've heard about the rights of the child and so on. And such convention are the rights of persons with disabilities, ensuring that countries meet these international obligations. It's all well and good within our own context. Say, well, this is our country, and this is how we are going to do things. But that, in the broader scheme of things, we fit within a region, we fit within the global world, and hence, we have to make sure that we comply with those standards. And the world, in terms of the global perspective, is moving towards those sort of treaties and conventions. Well, I think I am probably right, because even though it's not there, it's implied. So Dr. Paz, I'm with you. Resource allocation. It guides the allocation of resources and support services, ensuring that they are distributed fairly and effectively. Right? So again, our resources that we have to ensure that it's allocated according to the priorities and the needs. Barrier removal. The policy should aim by removing environmental, educational, and societal barriers that prevent children with disabilities from fully participating in their educational system. I had another personal experience in Barbados when I was there doing my degree. And there was a young lady who came from the United States in a chair, in a wheelchair. And at that time, it was extremely difficult because even the walkways were not fully prepared, yet to mention the lifts and the stairs to accommodate that. But within a couple of months to a year, the university at the level of governance recognized that they need to do something about this. And eventually they start bringing in workmen and they change the paveways, the walkways, start putting those slip ramps and so on. And gradually, bit by bit, the university was transformed where persons with wheelchair were able to access, most of the buildings and so on. Now, that in itself, when I was thinking about that, recognizing how important it is that our learning spaces and our work environment do make provisions for that. Teacher training, of course, this is where education comes in a bit, but it emphasizes the need for teachers and other persons who work with children with disabilities to provide the necessary support for inclusive education. And community engagement, we cannot leave that out because what we are saying that at the end of the day, persons with disability, they too will need to make their contributions to the communities in which they live. Thus, we have to make sure at all levels we engage them in that sort of experience. And so the policy should encourage community involvement to support the education of children with disability and tackle societal barriers. So in a nutshell, those are some of the things that you will think about when we are looking at, what's the reason for, or the purpose, or the aim of having a national policy on disability. SEND profile, Dr. Paz spent some time, give some additional information, but just briefly, from the education end, we had diagnostic testing across the three sectors last in April. Approximately 32 students of the most severe cases across the primary and secondary were assessed by experts. Detailed reports were compiled, and now we have ongoing planning sessions between educational psychologists, school leaders, and parents to discuss and plan how to best address the findings in that assessment. Of course, Dr. Paz touched on some of the common issues, but we do still have autism, dyslexia, ADHD, and of course, speech, hearing, and sight is also important. Sometimes I believe that they're underscored, especially sight and hearing, because it's only sometimes after things reach a real severe case when we recognize that some of our children do have issues with hearing and sight, and we want to catch those early. Some of the challenges in relation to SEND. Developing the individual educational plans, referrals, and counsels. Adequate and purpose-built design space to facilitate student learning. Dr. Paz made mention of that, especially calming rooms and things of that like. Technical support to enhance and sustain professional development training sessions for relevant staff in the SEND. And when I say relevant staff, I mean all persons, again, who come into contact with persons with SEND. Of course, training and support for SEND matters, procurement of materials, tools, resources to support SEND programs. And of course, we live in a world where technological devices, tools, gadgets, what you may call them. And we have to make sure that we find ways that we utilize ITC in such a manner that it will help to improve the networking between SEND professionals regionally, well, of course, locally should be there as well, and internationally. Because sometimes it's the sharing of best practices give us some of those shared experiences. Some of the strategic actions we can look at, of course, we continue the recruitment process of teachers and professionals, hiring of suitable personal assistants, especially when you have those severe cases in the schools, training and development of counselors and classroom teachers and others, which we can add, procurement of adequate SEND resources, but in particular diagnostic testing tools, and I can add here that we were able to procure at least 2 of the battery of 4 or 5 testing tools that you need. And I must say as well, they're quite expensive pieces of tools, but, but that is important because these testing tools will help at the diagnostic aspects. And we know in the medical field, in the field of science, in the field of psychology, clinical or otherwise, that test is going to really put you on the footstool of finding out what really is the issue. Because if we don't really find the issue, then sometimes we can't address the problem fully. And once we find out what the root of the problem is, then we can start addressing all the issues and ensuring that we're moving in the right direction. And of course, supporting parents. We can never, ever underscore the importance of parents, because at the end of the day, the children, they do spend more time at home than anywhere else. They spend considerable time at school, in the wider community, and elsewhere. But they spend most of their time at home. So parents usually have a lot more time with their children. And so we have to bring them on board to ensure that they're part of the equation as it relates to training and personal development. Because I can tell you, there are times when you hear parents who say, I just don't know what to do. I need help. And you don't want them to be in a position at all times they're throwing their hands up. Because as I said, they have them for a long time. So if they have some bits of information and knowledge and skills that they can assist, then it would make the matter. And what it would do, it would reinforce what we're doing as professionals in the different areas. And they reinforce that, and so we have a more complete picture. Okay, and then just to continue, in terms of the strategic thrust and priorities, of course, the human and resource development is important. Engineering the human resource structure to respond to performance indicators, prevent operational interruption, but to ensure timely hiring of relevant persons for SEND. That is critical. Training and development, we can't overemphasize that. Expand training and professional development opportunities for staff to respond to administrative, operational, and technical needs, thereby increasing the quality of instruction, support services, and leadership capacities for SEND. Policy reform, and I think that one fits nicely into what we probably plan to do for the day. Review and update key transformational policies in all sectors to ensure that they reflect current practices and support SEND strategic plan. Infrastructure and maintenance. Enhance teaching, learning, sports environment by providing improved accommodation, whether it be building, whether it be furniture and service plant, and instructional resources, interactive whiteboards, lab equipment, adequate classroom spaces, and education fund management information system. That's an image so that we can have data at our fingertips, especially when it comes on to reporting. And of course, capacity building and technical support, formulate policies and share information on code of practices, and develop communication tools, skills, and strategies that will address and ensure children at risk are protected from all forms of harm, and adequate provisions are put in place to cater for their special needs. I'm trying to get this one a little bit, but it's just basically looking into the future. Of course, we have a lot of bits of the puzzles, but we just want to make sure that we have that comprehensive framework when it comes on to dealing with the business of SEND. You just have a chart or an organization chart, director of the thing. You have the head of the pupil support unit or student services. You have your counselors, and I put multilingual in there because we know as well that we have a number of persons who are part of our community now who are from different language countries, whether it be French or Spanish or otherwise. The safety officers, we need to include them because they're dealing with children, they play their role. And then you have the SEND teachers and our teachers, and then you have your teacher assistants. So it is a combination of the different persons, relevant persons, coming together to work the business of providing support and services for our SEND students. And in summary, let us read the summary together, please. Yes, everybody, let's read it together. Participation, sorry, I don't, and contribution. Okay, thank you very much. Good student. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Julius. Chats, are they there? Oh, they're not. Okay. Okay, we're liaising with Antigua at the moment, and I understand that they're not quite ready. So what we can do, we have an opportunity to, from what you've heard thus far, from what you've heard from Dr. Paz and Dr. Julius, there's especially well, both of them, in fact. I was going to say, Dr. Julius, there's a number of challenges there for the system. No doubt those challenges will find themselves turned into recommendations into the final policy, and then hopefully the policy is implemented, because a policy without implementation is a waste of time. So, as I said, you have an opportunity now, from what you've heard from Dr. Paz and Dr. Julius, to pose any questions you may have to them at the moment. Please come up if you... Unless we have a roving mic. Do we have a roving mic? Tech people? Okay. You can stay where you are.
Good morning. My first question is to Dr. Paz. And before I pose the question, I want to thank you for your presentation. And then I would like to ask, based on the very alarming statistic that you have presented concerning the level of special needs identified, could you tell us a little bit more about the assessment? That's one. And secondly, if this is so, what do you think is the reason for the manifestations?
Okay, thank you, Clarice, for the question. So in the next presentation, the group from chat from Antigua, who is online now, they're going to tell you more details about the assessment that they have done according to the patients I have referred to them. And then the second question is quite tricky, that what do I think? So the new analytical studies will take place to see what the nature of these challenges are, and then we can speak more with more scientific base what's happening. So I see Antigua on the screen.
Good morning. Is everyone hearing me?
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Good. Thank you for having me a part of your workshop this morning. Permit me to share my screen and share a presentation with you all. Okay, everyone seeing my screen clearly? Can everyone see and hear me? I'm not sure if I'm up on the screen on your end. All right. Good morning again, everyone. All protocols in the room observed. My name is Mona Gardner. I am a speech and language pathologist here in Antigua, and I am the owner of CHATS. CHATS is a speech and language therapy clinic, the only of its kind on island in Antigua. And within my practice, I have an early intervention program where we serve children between the ages of 0 and 5 who've been diagnosed with some sort of learning disability, a communication disorder. We just observe some neurodiverse differences in their brain and how they learn. So these children are in my practice in a therapeutic setting, and we're doing intervention with them. Our intervention is holistic with the children that we serve. A little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in biology, and I have a master's in speech and language pathology from the University of the West Indies. So while working here in Antigua, we were in the clinic at the hospital here doing some intervention services with the children in the community, and Dr. Paz had the opportunity of observing our dynamic intervention. And it was there that the interest of serving Montserrat was sparked, and Dr. Paz invited us over to Montserrat, and that was 2 years ago, and it has been a pleasure serving the community there and offering our services. Just a little bit about myself as a speech and language pathologist so we understand where we're coming from. As a speech and language pathologist, we serve the entire lifespan. We serve patients from 0 to 99. We serve and we diagnose persons with communication disorders, feeding disorders, literacy, hearing impairments, fluency, motor disorders, stroke patients, voice disorders, dysphagia, swallowing, expressive and receptive language delays. The scope of practice as a speech pathologist is very wide and dynamic. I do feeding disorders with babies, and I see trauma in stroke patients who've lost the ability to feed, swallow, dementia in the older population. But for the purpose of this presentation, we'll be focusing on the pediatric department. Those are the persons who I would have served while in Montserrat. We did do some small stints with the elderly department, but we will be focusing on the pediatric. As a speech pathologist, we exist in multiple settings. We exist in schools, private practices, hospitals, the NICU, nursing facilities, acute care. So basically anything from the neck up, the speech pathologist is able to intervene, okay? So our visits to Montserrat. So far, we, the CHATS team, we've had a total of 2 visits to Montserrat. We had 1 in 2022, we had 1 in 2023, and we have an upcoming one in a couple of about 2 or 3 weeks where we will be revisiting the beautiful island of Montserrat. Once we visit, we have spent an average of 4 days on island. And when I say we, the team consists of myself, the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, and an early interventionist. So upon every visit, it's usually myself and 2 additional staff members who are on island, okay? What we do in the first 2 days of our visit is we have consultations with families. These are families who would have been referred by Dr. Paz through her screenings in her pediatric clinics, or they may be referred from a teacher, but all of the referrals come through Dr. Paz, and she sends over the list to myself in Antigua, and we set up appointments with families. The first visit is what we call a consultation, and in this first visit, it's about a 45-minute session, whereas we have conversations with families and we take them background on some history. So we're taking birth history, we're taking developmental milestones, we're taking speech milestones, feeding milestones, we're taking some history on the social skill of the child. So the parents are answering some of the questions. We're asking parents specific questions of what they're seeing manifesting in their child. We then go forward to observe the child in our setting. So we are very much play-based. So in the 45 minutes, while I'm interviewing the parent, the occupational therapist and the early interventionist, we're pulling out some toys. So we're observing the child's play skills, their communication skills, their social interactions, and we're observing them for certain milestones that should be taking place by a certain age. Sometimes if we may ask the family, well, is your child doing this? And they may not be sure of the answer. So we want to observe clinically for ourselves some of these milestones that are happening. So we use some standardized screening tools as well. So we would ask the child some questions if they're verbal in order to answer us. And based on the response of the child and based on our observations, we then observe the child. We don't diagnose the child on our first visit. We recognize, okay, there are some concerns here, but what we're looking for are some strengths and weaknesses of the child. We know by a certain age, a child should be walking, talking, communicating, answering some questions, have specific play skills, pretend play skills. They should have some academic markers that we're looking for. They should supposed to be able to identify some letters, some colors, some shapes. But most importantly, we're looking for functionality in these children. So this is all that we're looking for in the consultations sessions. So those are our first visits. We will see, we do an intake with all of the new families. Then from there, on our previous visits, we have done classroom visits. Okay, we would have visited some preschools just to observe the setting of some of the children that we're seeing in our consults, how they function in their classrooms, and hearing from the educators, what are their concerns and what are they seeing. On another visit, we did do some teacher info sessions because we recognized that teachers were crying out and asking some specific questions, and it was necessary to empower the teachers. So we would have done some teacher training sessions, giving them some really quick tips and strategies of what they can use in the classroom if they recognize that a child would have been delayed. We've done some awareness via radio broadcasting. So this is basically the setup of what our visits look like, okay? With each visit, though, we want to grow on the program and we really want to meet the need of Montserrat. We don't want to just go in and say, this is what we think you need, but we've wanted to hear back from teachers. We wanted to hear back from medical professionals. What is it and how we can serve you in Montserrat? So one of the things that we heard a lot of was teacher trainings. Teachers were crying out for more support because they themselves are recognizing that more and more children are showing up that they're concerned about, and they themselves are not even sure what is happening with the strengths and differences that the children are presenting with. So they were concerned. We did our last visit last year, we did do a parent session because our time on island is just so limited in terms of assessment and intervention. We try to empower our parents as well because we want to teach our parents while we're not on island what they can do in the home to provide intervention for their children, okay? So after consult sessions on our first visit, on our second visit, we would have rescreened some of the families and we provide our families with home programs. We would have provided some of the families or most of the families with home programs. However, some of the families struggled to implement these home programs because of their own circumstances, because of the severity of what their child may be presenting with, and their lack of knowledge of how to really intervene with their child. So this is the data of the visit, okay? In 2022, when we first visited the island, Dr. Paz would have referred a total of 19 families to come through the clinic, and we did our assessment, we did our screening. So the blue bar showed the total number of clients that were seen. Okay, so on our first visit, 19 families, children between the ages of On our first visit, the children between the ages of 0 and 8, there were 1 or 2 older ones, although we would have preferred the 0 to 5 population, but we had a few older ones who were in the population there. So 19 families were screened at consultation. I wanted to bring a graph so we can see the new families. So there was 19 new families. And upon our first visit, 18 families presented as neurodiverse. And when I say neurodiverse, that means a child presented with some differences in comparison to what a typical milestone would look like. So the child had some areas of weaknesses that we were concerned about. And in my next slide, I will discuss what these weaknesses were, okay? In 2023, we saw a total of 36 children, okay? Those 36 children includes what we saw in 2022. So the red bar showed the new families who were signed on in 2023. So we had 17 new families who were referred to our clinic, our specialty clinic in 2023. So we served a total of 36 families, but 17 were new. Of the 17 new families, 16 had some sort of neurodiversity that we were concerned about. So as you can see in 2022, majority, except for one child, we were concerned about, and the same in 2023. This 17 and this new 16 number does not include the 18 that we were concerned about in 2022, okay? So as we can see, each visit, there's an increase of new clients that Dr. Paz is seeing or showing concerns about that she's referring to our clinics. And not only is there an increase in the referral, but we recognize that majority of the children who are referred to our clinic show some sorts of concerns in their neurodiversity in terms of their development, okay, their entire development. So that was 2023. This little black bar graph right here, which shows the number, it shows the number 1. In 2023, we would have discharged 1 child from the program, okay? When we saw the family in 2022, we gave home programs to 18 families. And when we rescreened the children in 2023, we were only able to discharge 1 family. I'm sorry for the noise in my clinic. We were only able to discharge 1 child. So 1 family was able to put the early intervention program in place, and the child was able to then close the developmental gaps. We did see some increase in some other families, but the children still required more support, and we continue to be concerned about the development. So only 1 child has been discharged from our clinic thus far. In our upcoming visit in 2024, which is in a couple of weeks, we have a growing number, and I'm going to say 15 plus new families have been registered. And plus, because the number is going up, I feel like each week, Dr. Paz sends a new patient over that needs to be screened in our upcoming visit. So in 2024, coming up, we will be seeing over 45 families, including the consultations and interventions for the ones you would have seen in 2022 and 2023, and 15 new families in 2024. And of course, the number is 0 in terms of discharge, because upon our visit, we'll see how many families from 2023 would have benefited from their home programs that we would have given to families and shown them, and any of these children meeting their milestone markers, okay? So when I say neurodiverse, what am I referring to, and what are the characteristics we're seeing? What are these children presenting with? Okay, I didn't break down the numbers to say how many, but those graphs in gray, the 18, the 16, those numbers, what are these children presenting with? The children are presenting with autism spectrum disorders, sensory processing disorders, speech sound disorders, expressive and receptive language delays, fluency disorders, academic delays, fine and gross motor skills delays, and some play skills delays. There were a few families and few children who have medical diagnosis of some sort of genetic disorder. So that means they were already predispositioned to have some sort of language delay or cognitive delays. But majority of the children don't have any medical diagnosis. They're just showing developmental delays. And these are the neurodevelopmental delays that we're seeing. I know the autism spectrum disorders, the numbers are rising worldwide. In 2020, the CDC reported 1 in 36 children are being diagnosed with autism. And back in 2000, it was 1 in 150. So we definitely see the rise worldwide with the number of autism spectrum disorders. Sensory processing disorders, when the child can't tolerate certain senses in their environment, and that's where the child is covering their ears. The child doesn't have much joint attention. They're playing by themselves. They're toe walking. They're spinning. So this affects the child's functionality within the classrooms. So a lot of teachers are complaining, saying, I'm not sure why little Johnny is not attending as they should, why little Johnny is not interacting with their peers. They're tending to play by themselves. We saw a few of the children diagnosed with sensory processing disorders. Some of the children, speech sound disorders. Speech sound disorder is when a child is not able to articulate a certain sound, so their words are unintelligible. For example, instead of saying cat, they're saying tat. So this affects their phonics skills in schools, and this affects their ability to share and communicate intelligible. Expressive and receptive language delays. Most of the children who we would characterize as neurodiverse, the 18 children, the 16 children, they have co and dual diagnosis, okay? So most of them, that 18 and that 16, have an expressive and receptive language delay. That means they're not expressing themselves as they should. Some of the children were nonverbal, for example, 3-year-old, 2-year-old, who should be speaking and communicating in sentences. They're either not having those functional words or very limited vocalizations. We had one child who had a fluency disorder, that's stuttering. Children were exhibiting academic delays, fine motor skills, children who were not able to hold a pencil and write as they should for age. And a lot of the children had play skills delay. They weren't able to come into the room and do a back and forth engagement and interaction. So this is where we say neurodiverse, where some children are presenting with strengths and weaknesses. And these were our concerns, okay? These are the diagnoses, these are the areas that we recognize that the families that we served were showing up with a diagnosis in these areas, okay? Early intervention is key, and that's why I'm excited that Dr. Paz has collaborated with us to spread this message across Montserrat and really go into screening the 0 to 5 population. And once we recognize signs of weaknesses, we want to refer the children. We don't want to wait and see. That thought process and that theory, it's outdated. There's nothing to wait and see. Prevention is better than cure. We want to intervene early because 90% of the child's brain is developed by the age of 5, okay? Forcing the brain to make the connections, to increase communication, forcing the brain to increase their play skills, that is most impactful between the ages of 0 and 5. So that's why we really want to spread awareness, and we don't want to lose our generation through the age of 0 and 5 by not intervening. I have this saying where I don't like 5-year-old brains, and it's because I'm not saying we're taking away hope from families, but intervention and support look a lot harder for a 5-year-old versus that 3-year-old. Okay, I've been working in Antigua for 7 years, and although they may not be a cure for autism or sensory processing disorder, intervention between the ages of 0 and 5 can lessen the severity and increase functionality for a lot of these children. We serve children who we see, once we work on their areas of weaknesses and increase them to strengths, they go on to mainstream settings. They go on after the age of 5, not needing support. I like to draw the image of a chronological age of 3. So the child is actually 3 years old, but they're functioning as a 1-year-old because of where their weaknesses are, because they're not playing, they're not communicating. So the child now has a 2-year gap. When you're 0 to 5, it's easier to close that 2-year gap versus the child who was 6, 7, and 8 and operating as a 3-year-old. The brain closing the gap slows down after the age of 5. The research shows it. It's proven that early intervention is key just because of what's happening in the brain. The brain is placid between that age, and we can form those connections between the ages of 0 and 5. So this is what we're really trying to push for the Montserrat population, for those families who we're seeing and screening, majority of the children that we serve in that 45 number of families that we're coming up to see are between the ages of 0 and 5. And as you can see, the concerns are for a large number of those families, okay? So these children really require the support. They really require the intervention to close these developmental gaps. We can save the next generation by the impact and the intervention that we do within the ages of 0 and 5. What is early intervention? Early intervention is a process of providing services and support to infants and toddlers and their family. Intervention is not only with the child, intervention is with the caregiver. So they too can be equipped to know what to do and to work with the child. Intervention also involves the entire team, the psychologist who's serving the child, the teachers need to be equipped, okay? So providing services for all the persons involved in the child's life, and we want to prevent the risk of further severity, developmental delays, okay, health conditions, okay? So the goal of early intervention is to lessen the effects of the disability and its effect on the child's life, all right? Early intervention, we focus on cognitive development, communication development, physical development, social and emotional development, and adaptive development. And it requires a team approach. It can't just be the teachers only. They play one role, the families play another role, but there's specialists who need to be involved to give the correct intervention and advice to the families. As I mentioned, we have an occupational therapist on our team as well. When we think about a child's occupation, we think about a child communicating, playing, feeding themselves, potty training, writing in the classroom. That's where the occupational therapist comes into play to help the child with their everyday skills. All right, so that's why the team approach, the pediatrician, nurses, we all play a critical role in serving children who present with any sort of developmental delay early. Do anyone have any questions before I continue? Sorry that I'm rushing. I do have a session to go to, but does anyone in the forum have a question for me before I go on to recommendations?
I must congratulate you for what you and your team are doing.
Thank you.
But would there be any value in assessment, in another team doing an assessment of the same children to see if the results would be similar?
In terms of another team doing it, that's why standardized measures are so important. So another speech therapist or a psychologist, as long as we're all using the same, we're all trained on the same standardized measures. And in terms of validity and reliability, if the standardized measure shows up something different in another group, then that's concerns with the standardized tests that would have been developed many years ago in terms of what we're seeing. So in terms of another team coming in, I am 125 million% sure they're going to see the same signs because of the tools that we're using. We're not only using our clinical observations, I'm not only using my own personal clinical insights, but I'm actually using standardized tools, which are worldwide recognizable standardized tools in order to observe and diagnose and rate strengths and weaknesses in the children that we're seeing.
Thank you very much for that. And I know that speech and language is your focus. Would there be any value in assessments being done by another team with a different focus?
Okay, so now I think I understand the question now in terms of another team. So speech and language is not only our focus. So the other additional persons who you would have had in the room while we were screening, we did have the educational psychologist in the room with us on our second visit. So that team was comprehensive, okay? So we have our pediatrician, which is Dr. Paz, we have myself, the speech pathologist, we have the occupational therapist, we have the educational psychologist who was in the room, who was present. I think she's still in post in Montserrat. So I think in terms of an additional person in the room, I think the team was comprehensive. maybe a social worker could be added to the team. We do have conversations with the teachers. So that's usually research and evidence base of the persons who need to be in the room in terms of the diagnosis of the child. Yes, I'm a speech and language pathologist, but I'm also trained in autism. I can diagnose autism. I am certified in order to administer autism testing and early intervention testing, along with the educational psychologist.
Thank you very much. And before I run, I'm going to mention the M word. And I don't have any money in my purse. So I cannot see how early assessment and early intervention could happen unless, Honorable Hector, we mention the M word in bold. So I think this is one of the problems we have encountered in the past, where if you look at the history of special education provision in Montserrat, and there are people in the room who over many years have done many things as professionals to foster special education in Montserrat. And one of the biggest problems was the lack of the M word in provision. And I must now turn to Dr. Julius, who gave us a great analysis of how the national policy affects education. But I would like to ask you, Dr. Julius, if there's no place for specific policies by the Ministry of Education that deals with special education. It is my experience that you have special needs policies for both primary and secondary. So where are we with this? And what about the Education Act? How does it fit into your presentation?
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. I think that the latter is more important. If we really take the Education Act, it is loose in the sense of representation for special educational needs. I think there has been discussion on some amendments to give it more currency, because we have to start with the Education Act and then all the other policies. So I think that is where the changes or amendment has to be made. Because I think based on how the Act is laid out, whereas and such words and so on, we want it to be more direct. And this is where you make reference to the M word. It will give more currency to provision, but of course with provision of those resources for that. And then when it comes on now to the other aspects, work has been done, of course, you're quite correct, in terms of draft policies for SEND. I agree with you that perhaps because the different levels of children and the developmental stage, maybe one has to be a little bit specific as it relates to primary and secondary, because we're dealing with two sets of children. Although some of these areas that we're dealing with run across the board. So definitely, it has to start with the Education Act and those amendments, and then trickle down into the policy. Thank you very much for your comment. I myself have to run.
Okay, thank you. I can wrap up on this. In terms of, I do understand that money concern is the same challenge. I think that's a worldwide challenge in terms of, because of the numbers that are growing worldwide exponentially here in Antigua. I'm in private practice, but some of those provisions can look at full-time posts instead of bringing in a private speech pathologist, bringing in a private occupational therapist, or educational psychologist, full-time posts within the ministries. It's something that we can also look towards. And this goes into my recommendations, also looking to train some persons on the ground there within Montserrat who can support through myself in Antigua, support families, intervention. What does that look like? Play-based intervention with who you have there on island, because the vision and the mission is that once we are not on island, that families can continue to get the support and interaction and intervention that they need, all right, within the classroom. So these are some of our recommendations. We see that there's need for intervention within the classrooms for teachers to not only know the terminology, but to see how it's put into practice every day. More creation of individualized education plans recognizing that the child who has some severe areas of weaknesses, the same who has brain differences, they would not be able to function in the classroom as a typical child. So their curriculum needs some sort of adaptation, so supporting adapting curriculums. Continued partnerships and forums like this is needed. Parent education and training. A lot of the families are just not aware of what they need to do. Some of them are overwhelmed by not knowing, how do I intervene for my child who I already know have a diagnosis? So more parent trainings and workshops for the families. Ongoing professional development for the teachers in the classroom, resources for the teachers. Research and evidence-based practices. From the first day that I arrived in Montserrat, I said, Dr. Paz, Montserrat has the perfect population size to collect data and research and monitor that is what is happening in children in Montserrat, especially that 0 to 5 population. The world is moving towards understanding what's happening because of the exponential increase of more and more children showing up with a diagnosis, especially post-COVID. Okay, COVID, we have to look at that time period and how did that affect the socialization of children and not being able to socialize, how has that affected their functional communication skills? So what does society look like post-COVID? That's a lot for families and children to navigate and the school system to navigate. What were the gaps that children were experiencing when the classroom looked different in that period? Were we able to meet those gaps and our children just being pushed on to the other grade without closing and doing remedial work for them? So this is some areas that require research, and I know Dr. Pat is very focused on providing some data and some research of what's happening on the island of Montserrat between that population. Another area is the creation of apprenticeship programs. A lot of the families or children who end up having a diagnosis or a severe diagnosis, what does their skill sets look like coming out of the classrooms and giving them functional tools to function in society, learning a trade, learning a job. So these are just some programs that we recommend or we can look at long-term of how we can support not only the 0 to 5 population where we need to look at, but our school leavers, and while they're in school, what does functionality look like for them there and then, because then we then go on to talk about how the child or the person who's not able to meet their academic needs in the classroom, how does that affect them socially once they leave the classroom, right? And definitely ongoing visits. I know the big M word is a factor of concern as we bring in private professionals to serve the community of Montserrat. But it's definitely have been a pleasure serving the community, re-engaging with the families. We do try to follow up with some of the families via Skype sessions for the families who can afford to continue to pay for the services, which is very few and far between of the families. But this is the data. We're looking forward to our next visit and seeing if we see more families being discharged because of home programs. We do know the evidence here in Antigua that some families just don't have the resources. Some families don't have the time or the knowledge to put in practice home programs. So they're really looking for more support from the professional and the specialists. Okay, so this brings me to the end of my presentation of presenting on the work that we are doing in Montserrat. The team will return and we look forward to serving. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. I'm not sure whether I know you've got another meeting. I'm not sure if there's any burning questions for Dr. Gardner before we let her go. Any? You have one? Quickly then, the mic.
Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. I noticed that children are playing more on gadgets. The mobile phone, parents will give them the mobile phones to play with, so they hardly play outside. How does that impact on the work that you're doing?
It greatly impacts it. Every teacher training, every parent training that we do, we talk about screen time and the brain. I actually have a slide that can show us that in one of my other presentations. It's that the brain is at its highest level of activity when the screen is on. So the child is accustomed, let me see if I find the image right here. Oh, it's right here. The brain is at its highest level of activity when the screen is on. So when you take away the screen time, the child's brain synapses is just so accustomed to the high intensivity. So when the child goes into the classroom, the teacher is not jumping, spinning, and moving to entertain what my brain is accustomed to. No, the child has to be more structured. So the child then exhibits behaviors of running, jumping, spinning in order to match what they're accustomed to that they're getting from that screen time, that high intensity. So I know I'm a professional, and yes, I'm a specialist who diagnose children, but sometimes I think we are over-diagnosing children with ADHD when all they suffer from the misuse and the overuse of technology. So that exists, and my numbers don't include that because that's just one area of it. And I can tell when a child, it's just solely screen time and not lack of communication, interaction in the home. So one, this excessive use of screen time can affect the child's hyperactivity and behavior. But not only that, it affects the interaction. If a child is always submerged in a screen, a TV, on a phone, they lose out on the social norms and the social interactions. They're not seeing mommy and daddy talking or having a conversation. They're blocking out the environment. So I see evidence of where I say families turn off the screen time, and you see children start increasing their communication skills. They start increasing their play skills. Screen time is one of the reasons why children find motor skills are delayed. They're not holding the pencils because they know how to flick the finger and write on iPads with the finger, the index finger. Those are not functional skills to teach a child in the classroom. And I know I'm going to hit educators for that as well in the classroom. And I know we're a technologically advanced society, but the overuse of it is a concern. We need to go back to singing songs and engaging with children and not using the screen as a way to educate. I'm not saying you can't show informative video, but the 0 to 5 population is the concern. Of course, your high school students or your primary school students, you can show a movie in the classroom because you're teaching a lesson about plants or whatever it is to support your lesson, but lessons should not be taught via screen time, or screen time should not be downtime for children. We are doing more damage to our children's brain by exposing them. The research shows it time and time again that children who are exposed to over 30 minutes of screen time daily, for some of them who are at risk for disorder, the disorder is heightened because of the exposure of screen time. I am passionate about the screen time and the high stimulation we expose our children to.
Okay, one more question from Whiskey John.
All right, good morning. I wanted to find out exactly when did you administer the test? Because you're talking about administering, this would have been to the preschoolers, and so you have the 3 to 5 year olds. So is it that you do it as soon as they enter the preschool, or is it midway? Because I'm concerned, I find the figures sound very high, or is it that the group of persons that you tested were only those who were referred to you?
The group of children that we're presenting on today in 2022 and 2023 are those who Dr. Paz would have flagged as concerns already. So these are children who were presented to me as concerns. We have not screened all children of preschools. That's something later down that we're hoping to do. But the children who we have screened and diagnosed or done consultations with are families who Dr. Paz would have identified that she's seen some concerns in their development. So that's why the numbers are looking as they look, because these are already children identified by Dr. Paz.
Okay, and you did the first set of tests, this is 2022, which is right after COVID. And so my other concern was, in your testing, did you take into consideration whether they were at school at all? Whether, because if you test them at the very beginning, let's say 3-year-olds, then it means that you're counting on the parents to fill that gap. If it's 4-year-olds, and I'm wondering, I don't want to say how reliable, but when we say that they are delayed, I think it's kind of contextual, and it kind of puts us in a funny position because of COVID, because of the fact that we need to consider whether their parents were in a position to prepare them, whether they're 3 or 4-year-olds. So those figures, I would love to get a little more detail, or to see a more detailed report as to how those statistics were compiled. I think it would inform how we move forward in the teaching, in terms of teaching and preparing those children.
Understood. I understand your question, and that's where the research comes into play as a possible causations. We're not looking at causations. We see that children are delayed, and we're not just looking, when we say delay, we're not just looking at, oh, your language skills are not where they need to be. It's a total, we're looking at the entire development of the child. So before a child gets a diagnosis, we're looking at play skills, communication skills, feeding skills all together before a diagnosis is given or before the child becomes concerned. And on visit 1, as I mentioned in the presentation, I don't diagnose on visit 1. I'm watching and observing the child. The first 19 that we saw, the 17 that I'm concerned about are showing signs. They get a diagnosis by visit 2, as we see once intervention starts at home, and after a year, are you still showing signs of delays? So delays, we can't only just look at what parent interaction looks like only before a diagnosis is given. A diagnosis is a diagnosis because of what the child presents with at the moment, okay? There's so many children who don't go to preschools at all, who end up being typical in terms of their development. So we cannot just rely on just post-COVID as a diagnosis. And as I mentioned, it's just not a first visit. These are families that we're following, okay? And a few of the families actually came into the clinic with pre-diagnosis already. I need to state that. These families would have gotten their diagnosis from the UK or from other professionals as well. And they were looking for confirmation on the diagnosis, especially the autism diagnosis that were given. Some of these families already had their diagnosis before coming into the clinic.
When you say following, is it that you follow weekly, monthly? How is that done? Is it a regular thing, or how is
Following
that done?
as in, I saw the families in
Tracking.
2022, and when I come back in 2023, I see the families again, and they are rescreened again in 2023. So when I come back in 2024 again, we're going to see, are the delays in continuing to increase? Are they still having the same gaps? Is the children making any sort of progress? So we're tracking them that way.
All right, so once a year. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Gardner. We've taken in, yes, please, give it up for Dr. Gardner.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good one.
Much food for thought. Thank you very much. And we thank you again for all the work you're doing to the children, for the children here in Montserrat. And long may that continue. We won't detain you any longer. Thank you very much for this morning. And we'll say goodbye at this time.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. All right, we'll pause there. You probably got more questions, but we'll pause. We're over time, and we'll take a break of 15 minutes now, and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. because we're going to be using it. Either your phone or your laptop, we're going to be doing some work. Before we get into it, before we get into the more SWOT analysis we're going to do about the situation of special education and needs services on the island, and you're going to have a discussion about what you heard this morning. First of all, we want to take an instant poll. So please take out your phone. If you have a QR code reader, and you would know what that is if you know what that is, you know what that is. If you don't, you won't know, and you have to put in the menti.co. If you haven't got a QR code, you have to put that into your browser on your phone and go to that site and enter the code. So, but for those who've got a QR code, just point it at that screen and all will be taken care of. And there will be an instant poll. For here, I'm looking to our tech team, our valuable tech team, to help us through this. And so, tech team, am I right in those instructions? Please follow up.
Yeah. So what you do is open either your QR code scanner or your camera. So you should be seeing some multiple choice options on the screen. You can vote.
This is a snapshot poll of where you believe we are now, at the moment, where you believe we are now. So it's a snapshot poll. It's all anonymous, by the way.
Anybody else need assistance? Everybody got through?
All right. Okay, thank you all. I think the majority of people have made their thoughts known. Okay, as I said, this is just a snapshot. Professionals and people in the room who deal and work in this area. So it's good to see where you think we are, because we can get an idea of where we need to get to and how far the progress we need to make in order to get where we want to go. And so, you can see it's very skewed towards one end, for those who can't see it, like me. The one on the far left is the very poor. It's on a scale from very poor to fair to good and very good in the green, so that the people in this room, the people responsible for services to children with SEND and adults, at the moment, this won't be forever, at the moment, you rate the services as very poor, very poor. Well, that means there's much room for improvement. That means we've got a lot of work to do. And that means we need to, that the discussions and the recommendations you're going to have at your table will be very fruitful, hopefully, going by your rating of the situation at the moment and from what we heard this morning. It's interesting, we have one very good vote there. And just interesting, I won't say any more on that. But we have very poor, fair, good. Okay, so we have a tie. We have a tie between very poor and fair. All right, that's where we are. We have no plans to repeat it at the end of the day, but I wonder if through what you hear from people, your views would change as we go on during the end of the day. Oh, some late incoming, so the fair have it now. Even though we rated fair, that's still not good enough for children who we're talking about under 5. We need it to be very good, or at least good, because children only get one chance. And if we heard about the plasticity of the brain, and that unless we prevent and early intervention, we can lose them. By the time they go through primary school, and if they go to secondary school without the support, there's a huge, huge challenge then to affect them. So anyway, that's where we are. So thank you very much for that instant poll. And so we know where we are in terms of our ratings. We move on. We move on. So we're going to do work now. So at your table, unless anybody has any comments about this response. Anyone got any comments about that? No? We move on. What we're going to do now is going from what you heard this morning. In your groups, you're going to populate a strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threat matrix. You're going to have a good discussion. You're going to identify the threats in Montserrat for SEND, special educational needs and disabilities children. What are the strengths in the system currently? One person has a lot to put into that discussion there, I'm sure, in the person who said it's very good. But you've all, I'm sure, if you can identify good features in which to amplify. We also want you to identify opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. They may be environmental, or people talking about the M word, let's just talk about finance. So you will do that at your table. Thereafter, you will go straight into and identify 5 priorities from your earlier discussions that you're going to put onto a grid that we have for you, and we will have a discussion at the end, all of us, where somebody from your table will present not your SWOT analysis, but just your priorities, But each table is going to start with the SWOT analysis and then put that into priorities. So, can I call on Nish again to explain how we can get electronically the tools that we're talking about that we want you to populate? On your table, by the way, it's a set of questions. They're just to stimulate your discussion, You don't have to answer them, but they're just to stimulate your discussion. So Nish, can I ask you to explain what we do now in order to get those tools?
Sure. So it's a similar process to the last one. You would open your QR code scanner or your camera and scan the QR code on the screen, or there's a URL to the left that you can type into your browser. Again, if you need assistance, you could just raise your hand and we'll come around and help. There's a question if everybody is required to fill in the SWOT analysis.
If you wish, but at least one person at your table should fill it in, at least one person. Just to repeat, we only need one person on your table to complete that form, but the main thing we want is the discussion. So let's not get bogged down with technology and through trying to get the technology right. We need the discussion at your table, basically. Just ensure one person has it captured. Okay, what's banned from your discussion is the phrase, "No money is there." And I had it from the Honourable Veronica Dorset. Hector has banned that phrase from your table. So you can just discuss finances, because that's important, but please don't say no money is there, because that has an effect of cutting through all discussion and killing it. So don't worry about money at this time. Okay. opportunities and threats. You've turned that into a number of priorities. We're going to hear what they are. And so, without further ado, let me, can I single out this table to the right? When you, I know this table hasn't submitted electronically, so your responses won't come up here, but you've captured them manually. And so we require somebody from your table to come up and represent your priorities. If you want to summarize your SWOT, 1 minute. If you want to summarize your SWOT analysis, please do so, but we're really only interested in your priorities. So if there's a person from that table who would wish to come up and represent your priorities. Thank you, thank you.
Good day, everyone. We came up with some priorities, and the first one, obviously, is to create a policy on persons with disability, and the action to be taken is workshops like these, making persons aware of persons the need to implement this policy, and that should be led by various stakeholders, including the Ministry of Health and Social Service. Number 2, research. I think we need to do more research on the whole dealing with persons with disability, and the action by doing that is collecting data which would more enhance decision making. Number 3 is promotion and awareness of the issues with dealing with persons with disability, and especially in children. And we can handle this priority by creating community awareness, doing community meeting in order to get all the persons involved. Instead of just creating one forum like this, you could go into the different community, meet with the persons, and talk to them about these issues that it's facing. Number 4 is, for a priority, legal protection and advocacy. And this is where we'll need support of government, as well as Ministry of Education, to prevent stigmatization, if there's such a word, and anyhow. Yes, we need the legal framework to protect these persons, because what we don't want is persons to be taking advantage of them. So, and the 5th one is to implement this policy in a timely manner, and that action by the policy and decision makers to implement the policy in a timely manner. Thank you.
Okay, many thanks. Without commenting on, we're going to go straight ahead, if that's okay with that group. Can I ask your group to our feedback? Can I ask your group, I don't know, did you submit electronically? The SWOT. Did you do the priorities? Did you get that far? You've got them written down? All right, well, if you can come up and represent them, that would be great.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Disclaimer, we spent a lot of time on our SWOT. We didn't realize this was the key thing. But anyway, essentially, we're saying that the priority should be, first and foremost, to build a foundational pillar in terms of getting the necessary data. And so that would require us to reflect on what works, what is not working, and therefore we'll be able to gather the evidence and the data and put systems in place so that we can collect the data over time, so that when we're making these policies, it's not we're now jumping out and just going to get the data on the day or just before. We'll be doing that over time so that Montserrat will have its own database and we won't have to rely only on foreign sources as a reference or capturing data like annually or in spurts. So once we're focusing on that, building the foundational pillars in terms of research, and then once we've gathered the data and we know what the issues are, the why, then we can build a framework and design solutions, and that will probably involve prioritizing training and developing persons in the industry, professionally developing those who are going to assess, those who are going to remediate, those who are going to support parents and all the stakeholders in the community along the entire spectrum of the process. So we're saying first, get the data, reflect, get the data, put the pillar, put the systems in place. Then we're saying we need to professionally develop our human capital and ensure that they have the know-how and the skills and capabilities. And then we're also going to have to, after we have trained them, we need the infrastructure. So we need to put those systems in the schools, institutions, perhaps build a lab and so on. That would be our next priority. So we'll move on to that. And once we have done that and we have built out the entire system, of course, we must say political buy-in. We need buy-in from all the stakeholders, but particularly the decision makers. So when we're doing the first stage, we're asking that every level in terms of this stage, like the awareness and so on, we felt at my table, now it wasn't me, okay, but at my table we're saying the decision makers, more of the persons who have how should I say it? They have this final say, that they're involved and they are made aware of what is required, all right? I think basically if those would be our three big must-haves at this time because we're in the early stages. I'll recap so that you get it clearly. Build the foundational pillars, getting the data systems in place so that Montserrat has a sound data collection system. Once that is done, we develop our human capital because we can now get people who know what it's all about to be involved in developing the implementation plans to take things forward. And once we've done that, we get the necessary infrastructure, the resources and so on to execute the plan. And finally, systems to track and monitor as we go along so that people don't fall through the cracks and it's not a one-off system. So those would be our 4 priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we can underscore your need for data and sound research, because once you have that, you can use that to apply for sources of funding regionally or internationally based on that. Okay, without further ado, let's take our, that table over there in terms of your priorities. You have it hard copy rather than submitted? No problem.
Whoa. Okay. Our priorities are, we had some discussions and we said, well, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Let us see how we can enhance what we already have. So since we already have persons doing diagnosis, we said early diagnosis and interventions are the most important because we say we have to catch them early. So we not only catch them early, but we do the interventions early. Number 2, now that we've caught them,
and we started the intervention, everybody needs to know about it. So we do an awareness campaign. And that we are hoping we'll do as soon as we probably leave the building. Somebody, if each one of us tells somebody, that is multiplied by the amount of us who are here, and these are the amount of people who will already know. Okay. And to have that done, we have collaboration of agencies. So it's not just the hospital or the youth department or education, it's all of us working together to make it successful. And then we have something that we thought was very important, and that was empowering the differently abled. Just because somebody is in a wheelchair doesn't mean their mind doesn't work. Just because somebody is blind doesn't mean they cannot be a very good speaker. So let us empower those who are differently abled and try not to take the things that we have, like sight and hearing, for granted. For example, this morning, when we were told to read, I have on my extra too, but I couldn't get to what was on the board. So I may not be, quote unquote, differently disabled, but I was at a disadvantage. And of course, we assume that everybody in here can read. And I think that is one of the problems with our disabled persons. We take them for granted. We figure you are that age and you're at that stage, you should be able to do so and so. So let us not take them for granted, but create programs that empower them. And then we have, as our priority, helping to change our people's mindset. You may not accept something, but the onus is on you to respect it. And because of our unwillingness to change, we may just assume that somebody from a particular family, because they have so much, they shouldn't have to suffer from a particular thing. And disability is no respecter of persons. So notwithstanding what your background is, where you come from, a disability, like we say, is not always physical. It is not always something you can see. And if I'm a little slow, I may or may not be disabled, but the onus is on all of us to respect, have patience, and let the person do what they have to do at the best that they can. And we have found that failure to respect differences may be one of the things plaguing persons with disabilities. For example, we spoke about stigma, and we know that if you feel a little tense, you won't go to, you may go, but you may not go to our doctor here because you may be labeled as crazy. And that in itself is discrimination. There are persons who are functional and they smile, but those smiles are very costly. Nobody knows what they're going through. So let us not judge, let us respect and empower those who are differently abled.
Many thanks. And accessibility is a big one. It troubled us greatly that we had to hold this forum up here, which isn't wheelchair accessible, we know that. And so it troubled us greatly. And okay, so very well done to that group. So moving on swiftly to the next group, Mr. Neptune and your group. Okay, did you submit it electronically? It's Teresina. Oh, is that yours? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. So our group, the priorities that we listed are, we wish to have committed, competent, and trained human resources. And you noted that we did a lot of objectives before human resources, because you can have a lot of human resources, but they're not making any difference. All right? Legislation and administrative and policy framework. Dr. Julius did mention that they have a framework. I've seen the framework, but the question is whether or not it's implemented or has it been actioned. Assistive technologies and necessary tools. So this, we said, is very important in order to do all the testings. The psychometric tools are required to gather the data. And as this group mentioned, data is actually important to inform policy and intervention. So if we have the right tools, they're very expensive. But if we have the tools, we can do a lot in terms of collecting the data. In terms of sensitize the public, we thought that we need to break the silence. Disability is very taboo here in Montserrat. If I have a child with a disability, I can tell you I would not seek the necessary help for what I'm gathering on the ground. And so it's important that we break the silence of disability. A lot of public education is required to break that in terms of how people think. I mean, if you have a child with a disability, the chances of you putting it out there is slim. So it's important that we do a lot of education that is happening on the ground. These are what we plan to do about it, because it don't make any sense to put it out there if we don't have a plan. So it's important to share with the public that we have chats, we are collaborating with chats, we are doing the necessary assessment, we are identifying early interventions. All of these are necessary if we're going to ensure that the public is aware of what we are doing to support children with disability. We're talking about the physical infrastructure of, because as St. Clair mentioned, coming upstairs on the steps, that's a challenge. So we're hoping to see more building being built with the building codes that support disability. Action to be taken, well, allocation of finances. Every year, the government of Montserrat, they have their budget. They say where they will put the millions. But the question, when we or persons who are in charge, if we don't see disability as being important, there's no way we're going to put the money there. So it's important that we have buy-ins from a higher level down to the PS level and the director level. And it can happen. It can happen. Source relevant professionals and resources. We're talking about population. Our population is declining. We have a brain drain. Quite a number of persons are leaving Montserrat, and I suppose those are the ones with the skills and the competencies. So we do need the relevant trained personnel and the resources in order to support persons with disability. Education programs for the public, as mentioned, we need to do a lot of education. We need to get out there on the radio, we need to talk about it. The more we talk about something, it's more it comes to light, it's more persons would hear and buy in. And so we do need to do a lot of education to the public. Professional training, yes, we need to do training. We need to factor in training as part of our plan. Every year we are allowed to give government of Montserrat our development plan. We have to put it in there so persons know that we do need to train the teachers, everybody who working with disability, including the parents. One of the discussions we had around the table is that some parents just lack the capability of supporting their children. So even though you train them, they just don't have that foundation in which to build upon, because they themselves may have a disability. So we do need other persons trained to work with them. And I think that's where I'm seeing a gap in our system. We need to train support workers, I will call them, or family support workers. More of those are required to support parents with children with disability. Thank you.
Thank you for that group. Just to mention, I think UNICEF, United Nations, did a situation analysis of children in Montserrat in 2016, and they themselves came out and said children with disabilities are hidden in Montserrat. And I think that's because the parents, for stigma or fear of discrimination, keep those children at home, hide them from society, and that was a finding from UNICEF at that time. All right, thank you to that group. The next group, moving on swiftly. Can I ask Dr. Paz's group, Aegis, etc., your priorities? Penny? Is it electronic or physical? Oh, you've done it electronically.
Good afternoon, everybody. So priority 1, updating the existing education policy, which does speak to SEND needs in the primary school area. So that needs to be, it was drafted, never implemented. So at this stage, it needs to be overlooked, updated to suit current needs, and of course, implemented. And by when? Somebody's calling now. We ambitiously said the end of 2024, and the lead agency will be education. And priority 2, implementing the action plan from the policy instead of letting it just sit somewhere this time. What is in the policy actually needs to come to fruition. And of course, a policy would have many different actions that need to be taken. So if we can update that policy by the end of 2024, then at least by next year, April 2025, you can start looking at key areas to be implemented. And again, that's on education. Priority 3, training and incentive for teachers, parents, personal assistants. We recognize that some of the schools do have personal assistants for children with special needs, but they are largely untrained personal assistants, so they require some training, as well as teachers, assistants, and community training, which everybody would have spoken about as well, is very, very important. And key actions to be taken: you need to identify the teachers to be trained. There needs to be the development of a training plan for others and a community engagement plan, and hopefully by the first quarter of 2025. And lead agencies, in this case, would be education, HR, and social services. And priority 4, develop a support network for parents. And maybe part of the reason why disabilities are hidden is that parents don't know what resources are available. We spoke about how parents may keep their children home, for example, because there's no belief that the school can help them. So there needs to be some kind of support network where parents know what resources are available, and as well as a financial support mechanism, because some interventions are paid, like chats, for example, and they would have mentioned that some parents aren't able to continue because they simply cannot afford it. So whether or not we want to acknowledge it, money is a factor, and we need to figure out how to get that financial support. And we said by December 2025, maybe we can start getting this off the ground. And last but not least, monitoring and evaluation. So when we looked at the Education Act, Mrs. Sorghum was so kind as to pull it up for us. There is a council of, what's the name of it? She's gone. I can't remember the exact name of it now, but there's a council in there that's mentioned that's supposed to monitor things like this. So Special Education Council. So we need to get that up and running. And we personally think that if that is up and running, that can be the driver for a lot of these things. And what it would do is basically hold persons accountable for the actions. And it will also provide some forum where we can monitor the outcomes of the children that have been identified as having special education needs. And hopefully, since that council is already in writing, that should be a quick win, and you should be able to get that off the ground by the end of 2024. And as I said, that can help push the actions of the policy forward. That's it.
Great, excellent. I myself noticed that council, but I don't think it exists. So as that group said, we need to get it in existence so it can push forward this legislation. Also, I like that we need a support network for parents. I would add there using NGOs, so Children's Society and Red Cross can be an ally to parents as long as alongside the education department in that. All right, some good recommendations there. Two more groups, I think, one in the middle, one behind. Yes, Steve Weeks, Iceman's group, that group. Yeah, please come, Nyota. Thank you very much. And the point was made in that last group also that these policies, they need implementation. There's a number of policies kicking around that have not been implemented. And so, sorry? Identify them. So we need to make sure that at least this one, when we write this policy, it gets implemented. Thank you, Niall.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Speaker, may you allow me to rise on a point of order? Okay. So before I start, earlier it was indicated that the ILO Convention was ratified by the UK. How it actually works is that yes, they ratify, but all BOTs have the right to sign on to it. So I would not use the term it's not extended to Montserrat because it actually is. We are the ones who need to put it into place. So we are starting the process now. So our 5 priorities. We listed specialist equipment. Our first one really was money, and whether we like it or not. So specialist equipment, we have to be actions taken to create posts for and recruit SEND specialists at each level. We also talk about getting into the school system so that we can start the education process from the school system and not just educating the public. Because when we get the education system involved, students, that's where we start from. Because we know if we engrave their young minds early, then the next generation will continue. Also including antenatal and postnatal stages as well in that process. And we said, if we start now, we should be implemented by 2025. So here we go, finances, action to be taken, develop business case for national SEND program, explore alternative funding through agencies, and we also talk about getting external funding through UNICEF to help with this program, because we know that we can't do it on our own, and since they are the agency that will drive such, we thought we include them as well. So by when? Develop business cases by September 2024, and right away alternative funding through UNICEF. Lead agencies, we didn't specify anyone because we know that the Ministry of Education and Health is one big body. So we thought, okay, in terms of education, this is where Mrs. Maloney will come in to help educate the public, the education system. We didn't want to drop it all on social services. We know they have to play a part. So it would be a collaborative effort. Then policy, complete the preparation and approval of the policy, as well as to update the education, the Act. We talk about November 2024. Then the other priority implements family support and community education and awareness. Like I mentioned before, health promotion, schools, clinic, etc. Did we miss one? Okay, I'm not seeing the family support section, which we included. So we spoke about having support groups for parents and children with these disabilities, right? Thank you.
And last but not least, is perfectly formed group of three there. If one of you could step up. There we go. Thank you very much, Nurse Daly.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So this morning, after listening to Dr. Paz and also the presenter from Antigua, I think a lot of work has already been done in terms of research and in terms of the issues that are happening with our special education needs. And so in terms of our priority areas that we've looked at, finance was our #1 priority because without money, can't really do anything much. So money is really important in terms of making things happen. So we're looking at, well, the lead agency, Government of Montserrat, and possibly an increase in the budget in the next budgetary year, 2025. Okay, so that's our #1 priority. Our second priority area is updating the policy. So there's a policy already, and so it's to ensure that the policy is completed. There's a draft policy. It's to ensure that the policy is updated, completed, and also implemented. Because in terms of ensuring that we're talking about finances and in terms of making sure that some of these things are addressed, the policy is important in terms of making these things happen. And what we discussed in our group is that if these issues are not addressed now, in the next 15 to 20 years, what sort of Montserrat are we going to have? Think about it. Think about our lives now. How were we 20 years ago or 30 years ago, right? The society we are seeing now. So if the issues with our children are not addressed now, in the next 20 to 30 years, imagine the Montserrat we are going to have. All right, so it's important that those priorities are addressed. Also, our third priority is professional assessors. So we're looking at recruitment. I think Dr. Paz mentioned in her presentation speech therapists, need for speech therapists, occupational therapists, to provide the support for the children. And the presenter from Antigua also mentioned some of those in her presentation as well. So we know that it's not going to happen right away. So we're looking at time 2025, hopefully maybe by September next year. That is where the budget comes in again. And our lead agency, Government of Montserrat, and the Ministry of Education, possibly the Ministry of Health as well. So a collaboration of these ministries and the Government of Montserrat. Our fourth priority is training. So we have to think of also training our own people, our local, our teachers and other persons within the community. So we can look at sending persons overseas for training, and we're looking at, each year we have a list of training needs that comes out from the training department. So maybe some of these areas can also be placed as priority on the list of training needs for persons within the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, in order to provide long-term for our system. So 2025 academic year, possibly. And Our final area of priority is resources. So within the school setting, physical stuff that the children will need, and also in terms of adding more resources, human resources and also physical resources. So this would probably be coming from, in terms of lead agency, Government of Montserrat again, 2024, 2025 as our time. So that's it for our group. Thank you.
Many thanks, Nurse Daly. Moving forward, you're right to project forward in terms of our population, because we have an aging society, as we know, and we have a dwindling society, as we know. We have significant numbers of under fives with developmental delays going forward. So all of that is a recipe. So we've been warned. We need to take action on that. Okay, so that's that for this morning. Let me stoke your appetite for this afternoon. We have Mr. Steve Weeks and Nyota Mokare for adults. We also and they also represent the Montserrat Association of Persons with Disabilities. That's a partner in this policy. Alongside them, we have the president of the MAPD, Ms. Harjinder Jotto, and Mr. Craig Bruin, the campaigns manager. They both will make a presentation this afternoon also. So there's lots to return for, so please enjoy your lunch. It's ready, it's waiting for you downstairs, and if you can come back at quarter past, so I shaved a bit of that hour, if you don't mind, quarter past, and then we'll kick off again. Thank you very much, enjoy your lunch.